back. Pleasure to see a fair number of old friends. I shall try to use my 10 minutes effectively. A couple of points to you on the checks and balances. Well, if the checks and balances involve, why is it that the Constitutional Court throws out laws and things like that? On Club Radio, details are fake, so I'm not going to go into the details. I will tell you an anecdote. We had a hearing in the European Parliament last week. Bulgar, with whom I have regular discussions on Club Radio live, I have to add, came along. And in the middle of, while he was sitting there, he obviously got a text message saying, "We've just won." In other words, the judgment of the court was in favour of Club Radio, so this is the country where there are no checks and balances. Bulgar was delighted. I feel a lot of sympathy actually for Club Radio. You know, they've lost some frequencies. I had my hearing measured recently. I too have lost some frequencies. So, but to some extent, we're in the same boat. What I found a little difficult is that you're basically building a case on assertions. You haven't argued anything. You simply reproduced a whole set of statements which one can read throughout in the Western press. And I don't think you've pushed sufficiently deep. I would make one concession very happily. I think the law on churches was a mistake. And by the way, it has gone up to 31 now. You might have mentioned that to the audience, but obviously that's the kind of detail that doesn't look too good. So what I'm really trying to say is that, and this is where I in a sense, go back to the Crossroads metaphor. In 2010, the country was in a terrible mess. Whoever had won the elections would have had to introduce radical reforms. The public administration, which nobody has mentioned yet, was in a dire straits. Effectively, the police had been withdrawn from the countryside. And they would say, "We're not going to come out unless there's blood or death." Why do people pay their taxes? And that was the legacy of the left-wing government. People admitted to some of this. It seems to be that what Fidesz did was to grasp the nettle and launch a radical reform program. What nobody talks about, very, very interesting, is the reform of public administration. I think this is one of the things for which the Fidesz government will be remembered. It's very effective. It's actually not a power grab, it's deconcentrating power. I have a virtual constituency. Hungary is a single constituency, but my virtual constituency is Vosmegye, and I go there quite regularly. And they say it really is working much better now than actually is happening at the local level. It doesn't go through 163 different agencies, it's all concentrated in a one-stop shop. Doesn't seem to make the papers, yet that is actually something that's working very well. Let me go on, because I've got a lot of things to say in the next 6 or 7 minutes. Now, what I live pretty much on an everyday basis is that Hungary is in the dock. There are accusations made which cannot be refuted because nobody is interested in the detail. But you can only refute those accusations actually if you do go into the detail. What I'm saying is that simultaneously people switch from a political discourse to a legal discourse. When the legal doesn't work, they switch to the political. When the political doesn't work, they switch back to the legal. It's wonderful. That way you can get anything, anybody and anything. I think that what is happening is beginning to resemble a show trial, not a silent show trial, just a show trial. And certainly it's very clear that there is now a presumption of guilt with respect to the Fidesz government. The Fidesz government cannot be innocent, which I think is profoundly undemocratic. But there you are. What makes it ironic is that this offensive is being pursued in the name of democracy. I see a certain irony here, but then I like ironies. I like absurdity. What worries me more than anything else is the double standard. One small thing, Hungary at the moment is in the midst of a number of, it's the excessive deficit procedure, I don't want to go into the technicalities, and the infringement procedures being actually imposed fairly stringently by the Commission. Spain has just basically told the Commission, go away, drop dead, leave us alone, we're going to have an enormous deficit. I think that if Spain doesn't get treated in the same way as Hungary, the double standard will become so self-evident that maybe even the left will realize that Hungary is being singled out for, should we call it, special treatment. The problem with this double standard, is that it gives rise to a sense of injustice. And what I find in Hungary, not just travelling on the 61 tram, more widely than that, is there's a growing sense of resentment. They do read foreign papers. They do understand what the Süddeutsche Zeitung is saying. They do understand what Le Monde is saying. And they also deeply resent, you didn't mention this, Le Monde showing a caricature of Orban dressed in Nazi uniform. When Hungary took over the presidency, just about a year ago, the Süddeutsche Zeitung carried a cartoon showing Hungary as a hairy barbarian. They would never do this with any non-Central European country. It's the old, we've talked about this in previous occasions all the time, but this is the old trope that to the east of us there are hairy barbarians, and that's not dead, and I think it's immensely relevant to this entire bit. I would say I entirely agree with the two narratives that Zoltan mentioned. There are two narratives, but only one is heard, and that of the majority is not heard. Now, if you're going to be democratic, this is basic reference points. You refer to Copenhagen about here. Why is it that Western journalists, by the hundred, go to Hungary and never speak to centre-right voices? You never see them quoted. I mean, I can find 20 articles for you in the Süddeutsche Zeitung, even in the Frankfurter Allgemeine, which is one grade better, Die Welt. Oh God, don't talk to me about the Austrian papers, they're among the worst. But you know, the Svenska Dagbladet, I'm quite sure even the, I can't remember the name of the main Helsinki paper, they will all basically recycle the same story, recycle the same sources, the same people over and over and over again. Now I have a story from one of my friends, I can tell you his name if you want. A Western journalist was being taken round. He had already spoken to the 4 or 5 standard talking heads. And when he started to say, actually, no, it's not like that, it's like that, and that, a totally different narrative, the Western journalist wasn't interested. He'd already made up his mind, and that's what we're living with. We're living in a situation where people have made up their minds about Hungary. That's what I mean, the presumption of guilt. I'm worried, perspective from Brussels, about the increasingly deep cleavage line between the EU 15 and the EU 10, possibly Malta and Cyprus as well. I can't speak for that. If you follow this, you may know this, that the critiques of Hungary, which really reached it, it's an avalanche, it's quite extraordinary. They talk of Orban as they feel as if it were Lukashenko or Jackson deal, the Putinization of Hungary. I mean, that really is ridiculous. But it's the cleavage line which is interesting. That the Central European states, the EU 10, the ones who joined in 2004-2007, are beginning to understand that this isn't just about Hungary. This is about all of us. The Lithuanian parliament passes a resolution in support of Hungary. Lithuania is interesting because it's not a country with which Hungary has many links. The only link I can think of is that the University of Vilnius was founded by a Hungarian, Stefan Báthory István, who's king of Poland. Otherwise it's tricky. Yet you see a sense of solidarity. The Polish Prime Minister says solidarity with Hungary. I know that my Romanian colleagues in Parliament are very worried that they'll be next. Bulgarians likewise. What is the most interesting of all, we'll all know that we don't have very good relations with Slovakia. There's an election campaign taking place in Slovakia. Elections are on Saturday and Sunday. The Slovak press has not joined the crowd. Very, very interesting. And the Czechs have basically taken the view that, okay, well, we don't really like it. Schwarzenberg made one comment, which is relatively negative. And I think that there is something coming into being, this cleavage line between East and West. It worries me greatly because it means that the EU is breaking up. Not necessarily fragmenting is perhaps a better word. Why only one side finds outlets in the Western press? Basically because actually the narrative of the left finds a fit with the Western left. It's much easier to make sense of what the left-wing journalists are saying than what awkward characters like me, I suppose, are saying, which actually no, it's not like that. It's something completely different. That fit, of course, is absolutely vital in understanding any communication theory as to why that particular narrative has primacy and there is no equality. But what is interesting in the Hungarian left, I've looked at it in some detail, is that its support domestically is shrinking. The three left-wing parties put together may have just about the same level of support as the far-right York. In other words, their domestic constituencies is declining, which means that they have to get legitimacy from somewhere, so they get it from the left, in the West. It's fascinating. You know, they run off to Verhofstadt, and they also run off to Washington. They think that somehow this will give them the political power to do something in Hungary. The Hungarian voters manifestly don't want them. It's fascinating that they don't understand this. They can't confront their own weakness. And my own sense of it is, I just wish there were a normal left-wing party in Hungary. What we have, of course, is a communist successor. It's a mindset rather than as well as a party. Very difficult to do anything about it. One final point. And this is, Hungarians here will know this word, that the sense of inwardness, that we don't care about what's going on in the rest of the world. This worries me, because the rest of the world does count. Some of you will be aware there were two demonstrations beginning of the year, one on the 2nd of January, the other on the 21st. The one on the 2nd of January, let's be generous, 70,000 people turned out. That's a generous estimate. Enormous headlines all over, very widely reported. The one on the 21st, I was in Budapest, but I didn't take part in it, and I had to go off somewhere. Attracted, let's be ungenerous, 400,000 people, but virtually no publicity. That's the double standard. It's really getting up people's noses. And when I was down in Bosnia recently, this came up over and over again. Why is it that we're being treated so unfairly? So don't be surprised if every time the West, from whatever position, attacks the Orban government, it simply gets it more support, more votes. The people I talk to at all levels say, you know, there's a great deal I don't like about the Orban government, but we're going to support him because we hate what the West is saying. It's a dangerous situation because actually I don't believe in the old saying, extra Hungaria non est vita, that there is no life outside Hungary. We do belong to Europe, but not to the kind of Europe which is telling us what to do and how to do it. And that's really the subject of another discussion about where European Copenhagen criteria, if you like, begin, the national sovereignty ends and things of this kind. But that's a separate issue, and that is talk here.
Thank you very much.